This episode is brought to you by DistroKid.
You've got a great idea for a small business, but you just can't get it off the ground. You want to be your own boss, set your own hours. Well, new year means new opportunities, and Shopify's got you covered to help get your venture off the ground. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. You can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. And they help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard. Don't kick yourself next holiday season when your 2025 resolution list looks the same as it does today. Make it happen with Shopify. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/income.
It's Throwback Thursday.
Hey everybody, Chris DeMakes, a podcast producer. Chris Fafali is here. I hope you all enjoyed our Grammy Song of the Year preview episode this past Monday. And with the Grammys coming up this week, it got me thinking about all the Grammy winners we've actually had on this show. That whole episode was about Song of the Year, and we've actually had two past guests who won Song of the Year before. One of them was Dan Wilson, who received that honor in 2007 for co-writing Not Ready to Make Nice with the Chicks. Dan also won an Album of the Year award as a producer for Adele's album 21 in 2012. Dan, of course, came on our show to discuss the writing and recording of his band Semisonic's 1998 hit, Closing Time. You're going to absolutely love this one if you haven't heard it before. Before we get to that, though, let me just take a quick second to remind you to check out our Patreon at chrisdemakes.com. We do a whole other podcast called The After Party, and if you sign up for our Patreon, you'll get instant access to hundreds of episodes of that, plus there's tons of other stuff. You don't need me to tell you about what Patreon is. Just go check it out at chrisdemakes.com. Obviously, we would appreciate it because it helps us keep making this show. And we love making this show, so we depend on your support. Okay, let's get to it. From September 26th of 2022, this is episode 122 of Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Dan Wilson discusses Semisonic's Closing Time.
Hey everyone, today's guest is Dan Wilson, lead vocalist, guitarist, and songwriter for the Minneapolis, Minnesota rock band Semisonic. Together we break down the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the mega hit single, Closing Time, taken from their second album, 1998's Feeling Strangely Fine. What a monster of a song. I've loved this tune upon hearing it for the first time, and I appreciate the track even more now after discussing it with Dan. This song is simplistic in its chord arrangement, and it's that simplicity that lets the story of the lyric breathe and shine. Dan is also a multi-Grammy award-winning songwriter outside of Semisonic, having penned hits for superstars such as Adele, Taylor Swift, and Jason Mraz. You would never know it either, as Dan is about as humble and gracious as they come. We shared a few laughs at some suggestions the record label had when presented with this song. And thankfully, those suggestions weren't taken to heart, because the song is perfect as is. For all this and a whole lot more, stay tuned.
Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a Podcast.
Dan, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Chris.
Awesome. Where are you at today?
I'm in Los Angeles, where I often or usually am, I guess.
Okay. Any ties to Minneapolis still, where the band was formed?
Oh, yeah. Very much still tied to Minneapolis. My parents are there. My brother and sister and their families live in Minneapolis. Several of my best friends live there. I'm definitely, I've tried to stay connected to my community there for sure.
Well, I've taken a crash course in your career the past couple of days, and to say that I'm impressed is an absolute understatement. I've done probably at this point well over 100 of these episodes.
Oh, wow.
Breaking down,
Amazing.
breaking. Thank you. Breaking
I
down
thought
songs.
I was the first one. Damn.
Well, you are. You're the first one today. So, but I don't think I've ever. I know for a fact I haven't said this. I have songwriting envy, not jealousy, envy of Closing Time, the song we're going to talk about today. I loved the song from the moment that I heard it. I never get sick of it. You hear it at bars, you hear it at restaurants at closing time, you hear it at sporting events. Yeah. It just is the song that keeps going. And then, of course, as I said, I've been researching your career the past few days, and just the the amount of artists that you've collaborated with, writing Someone Like You with Adele, co-writing that and getting a Grammy for that, and being able to do that. You know, most songwriters, myself included, most of us have never had a hit. Okay.
Right.
And that's just the truth of it. I've written some really good songs,
right,
as have a lot of my friends and a lot of your friends. We never had the hit. You've had a couple of them. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's very mysterious to me because, you know, like all of us, I have certain artists that I think, oh, why weren't they more of a household name by now? Or why isn't, why isn't Neil Finn thought of as in a similar way to like Paul McCartney or something like that, you know, like. Hey now, don't dream it's over. Hey now. Why is, Closey or Close, I guess maybe she's French, so, why are certain festival producers not considered the best? You know what I mean? It's just like personal taste, I guess. But people can write the most wonderful things, and they don't always catch fire and become a hit. It's sort of a mystery how that happens.
Right. And you've been on both sides of the fence. You've been the performer. You've been in the band. You've had your face on the magazine covers. And yet you've also been the behind the scenes guy writing for all these artists. And I've had songwriters on the show that weren't stars. I've had Holly Knight on here before. We talked about a song that she wrote, and she's had a career behind the scenes, and she's just happy with that. You've lived kind of had one foot in both worlds, which is really cool.
I love performing. There was a time in my parenthood, though, that it just became obvious that I couldn't be on tour 200 nights a year anymore. And that, luckily for me, that time came after a lot of great things had happened. And after I had hits with Semisonic, and I had, traveled the world with those guys and basically played the tourist all over the place, and just really, really had a lot of good fortune. And so there are times when people say, do you wish that you were still like touring with the band, or still like, do you regret being, helping other people have hits more than you have, your own hits these days? And I guess part of my ego, I do regret it a little bit, only because it's fun to have a hit and sing a song in front of everybody, But one thing is, I kind of already had that. I did it. And so if I can help someone navigate through a point in their artistic, journey with that knowledge, like what is it like, and how is it difficult to navigate some kinds of public success? If I can be helpful and have, and as an outcome, have them enjoy certain things about the kind of success I had, then that's kind of doubly sweet for me. I've been listening to a song this morning which relates to this a little bit. My favorite Liam Gallagher song is called Once. But I remember how you used to shine back then. You went down so easy like a glass of wine, my friend. When the dawn came up, you felt so inspired to do it again. But it turns out you only get to do it once. The chorus, the end of the chorus goes, when the dawn came up, you felt so inspired to do it again, but it turns out you only get to do it once. And I just love that. It's like, fuck, it's so bleak, but it's so great. And in a way that's like to me, that's like a cheers, that's like, let's just drink the fact that we did it once, he can't do Oasis again. His brother says, no, it ain't gonna happen. he only got to do it once, you know, and he wakes up so inspired to do it again, but it turns out you only get to do it once. I just love that kind of perspective. Like, you can't relive a phase of your life. You can only do the next one, you know.
Yeah. Well, I want to expound on something you said a moment ago. So it's got to be completely rewarding and fulfilling to be able to get with an artist that maybe has this really good melody line and this chord structure, but they've just hit a wall lyrically, or vice versa. Maybe they have a great lyric they brought in, and musically you were able to elevate that and take it someplace and become something it never could have been without you. That has to be awesome.
Yeah, it's super nice. I mean, one of the funny things about, like, being an artist, I guess I would say, but I'll say, like, being a songwriter. And for me, I do think every once in a while I touch on a kind of greatness that feels like it's not really me. It's like a whole other thing that's just I'm channeling for the moment, you know? Or sometimes maybe it's all the things I've put together, all the skills I've kind of worked on or whatever. But, you know, so let's say I get some of the credit. Still, if I write something really great and I'm like, that was amazing, I don't know if I could ever do that again. Like, immediately I go straight to, like, well, that must be the last one ever, because I don't even know how I did that. Like, it's not like it feels random. It just feels like it's a one-time thing. And every time, you know, if I'm collaborating with somebody else, I know I have sort of a bag of tricks in a way, but mostly it's just compassion and interest and being, like, super into people and wanting to, like, make something great and see what happens when you have those desires come together, because I don't really know what I'm doing every day. You know?
How old were you, and what was the song called, the first song you ever wrote?
The first one I can remember, my brother and I got an acoustic guitar from our parents for a kind of a combined birthday present. We were 2 years apart in age, but my parents felt like they couldn't get us each a guitar, and they didn't want to either, so they only bought us one to share. So we were up in northern Minnesota, staying at a cabin in the woods with this guitar. And I wrote a song called Coming Down the Road. And I remember it was mostly based on the fact that I had learned an extra guitar chord that sounded immediately to me like something that George Harrison would have in a song. So I felt like I had, like, the key to the kingdom. I think I was 12 at this time. So I felt like I wrote, like, a Beatle-ish song. And my brother wrote a song the same day. Then it was his turn. He took the guitar away and came back with a song. And Matt's song, my brother Matt's song, was way better than mine. I was so annoyed.
He wrote the hit. You were the B-side.
I wrote a nice album track, you know, on a George Harrison
deep
record.
cut. That's awesome. Well, in between that first song you wrote at 12 and, of course, Closing Time, I'm sure you wrote a lot of songs. But, you know, after Closing Time, before we break into the track, you know, in 2007, you released your solo debut, Free Life, on American Recordings. It was produced by Rick Rubin, and the album included performances by Tracy Bonham, Sheryl Crow, Natalie Maines, and many others. And I had read that this kind of helped establish your reputation as a songwriter. Do you feel at that point is when you really branched out to write with others?
Let's see.
I guess what I'm asking, when did the light bulb go off? Like, wow, I could maybe do this with other people and have something here.
Well, honestly, it was probably around when I was 12, because my parents had Tapestry by Carole King, and we would listen to that a lot. My parents had like 10 LPs. They had like the Royal Canadian Brass playing sort of classical music in a brass band. They had Julius Katchen, pianist, playing, you know, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, and Mozart sonatas, and, you know, the hits of classical. They had 2 Beatles albums. They had Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper. They had Carole King. They had 2 records by Gordon Lightfoot. You know, we're nearly at the end of the list, and this was our listening for much of my childhood, was these 10 LPs. And one of the things Matt, my brother, and I did was look very closely at the credits on the records. And one of the things we noticed, for example, about the Beatles songs is that they had these credits like Lennon, McCartney on the songs. And then one of the things that I kind of realized when I was listening to Carole King, You've Got a Friend, that was the same song that that James Taylor had done. So it was like, wait a minute, Carole King is credited as having written it, but James Taylor's singing it on this other record. And I think that's where I learned, because we didn't have any lore. You couldn't go, there was nowhere to go to learn about how any of this stuff was made. It was wasn't even really a legitimate part of culture for books to be written, that many books to be written of, how records get made. But that's how I figured out, just for myself, that Carole King wrote songs that other people sang. That's when Carole King became kind of my North Star of like what to do with my life. And the fact that I was the lead singer of a band was mostly because I needed to have a band to write songs for. And I sang pretty good, and I could sing the songs the way I wanted to hear them. So in order to be a songwriter and have some kind of a platform or an audience, I was sort of obliged to turn myself into a lead singer of a band. But It was really all about trying to be a songwriter.
That's great. Well, we're going to get into the track now. The song "Closing Time" came off your second major label album, "Feeling Strangely Fine."
Yes.
On March 10th, 1998, the single was released, preceding the album by a couple weeks. And like I said, this song, as you know, was just everywhere. It was just one of the biggest hits of that year. The song's 4 minutes and 33 seconds.
Wow,
the intro
epic.
is
It's epic in length.
It is. It's over 4 minutes. The intro is 4 bars of guitar by itself, and the piano joins us panned off to the right for 8 more bars, leading right into verse number 1.
Closing time, open all the doors and let you out into the world. Closing time, turn all of the lights on over every boy and every girl. Closing time, one last call for alcohol, so finish your whiskey or beer. Closing time, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
I got to tell you, the chord arrangement here, G, D, A minor, and C, it's the whole thing until you get to the bridge.
Yeah.
When it goes to the B flat major chord there for like whatever it is, 4 bars, the simplicity of that. I so admire that in songwriting, when you can strip back as a songwriter and have restraint and say, I don't need to be highbrow here. The song is what it is. And the simplicity of this track is what, to me, makes it work so wonderfully.
I mean, credit where it's due. When I was in junior high, I discovered Bob Dylan at a library in uptown Minneapolis. I would take the bus from my house, and it was about a 20-minute bus ride to this library. And that library had a record player and, probably 100 LPs that you could take out. And it had John Wesley Harding by Bob Dylan, and it had Blood on the Tracks by Bob Dylan, and it had a bunch of... Actually, no, Blood on the Tracks I heard later from someone else. But it had a bunch of records, Dylan records, and not even the ones that everybody knows the best. Freewheeling Bob Dylan was one of the ones they had. And I would take them out and bring them home, or I'd just listen to them in the listening room of the library. So I became a crazed Bob Dylan fan in junior high school, and none of my friends liked it. He was not enjoyed by my fellow teens. But one of the songs I really loved by him was Knocking on Heaven's Door, which is like...
Sure.
I think it's like a... I'm gonna take this badge off of me. Closing time, open all the doors.
Yes.
It's like a, and that song also, Knocking on Heaven's Door. It's not like I consciously thought of it, but it never changes chords. It's just a verb.
No.
And another song that was really, really influential for me was, because of the artist, was Prince. It's probably Dylan, Prince, and Joni Mitchell were the people I listened to the most.
Interesting.
Until I was about 28. And the Prince song that I have to credit a little bit was When Doves Cry, because not only is the chordal structure of the song the same 4 bars, the entire thing, but the melody of the verse and the melody of the chorus are the same throughout the song.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Why do we scream at each other? This is what it sounds like when the doves cry.
When I heard that, first heard that on the radio, it was almost terrifying how minimalist it was, and how what a drone it was, and that funk drone was not unheard of in clubs or in dance music, but to hear it on the radio, something that was so unchanging and so robotic, was really moving to me, and I think that made me want to write songs that had the very fewest possible elements. And Closing Time was, I'm Feeling Strangely Fine, especially. There are probably 5 songs where I really, really tried to do that, just really dead simple, minimalist kind of approach to writing.
That's the hardest thing for me as a songwriter, is to be able to strip it back bare bones. And what do you have there? Is there still a song there with the 3 chords repeated? And I was amazed. I was amazed at a lot of things at this song we're going to go through, but I was just amazed at the chord structure, because I've heard this song hundreds upon hundreds of times. Just the other day when I found out you were coming on, I was at the grocery store and it came on. I'm pushing my cart along with a huge smile on my face going, I'm hearing the song again. And it didn't even dawn on me then until I got in the headphones and I got the microscope out and broke this song. I'm like, oh my gosh, it doesn't change. And that's just absolutely brilliant. After the intro here, we get into verse 1, and I'm going to read these lyrics, Dan, and have you set them up for us.
Okay.
Closing time, open all the doors and let you out into the world. Closing time, turn all of the lights on over every boy and every girl. Closing time, one last call for alcohol. So finish your whiskey or beer. Closing time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
I like those lyrics.
I like those lyrics too.
It's really good. When I wrote it, I was on a tear. I was writing a song every day at least. Semisonic came back from touring behind Great Divide, our first full-length LP. And we got a lot of good reviews, and our fellow musicians really dug the record. But it was not very visible. It was under the commercial radar, and I really thought it was a whole bunch of hits. I thought, and what did I know? But I thought Great Divide, the first album, had a lot of songs that would have been hit singles, but they weren't. And I really, really wanted to learn what it was about them that might have been just getting in the way of people relating to them. I didn't really want to add a lot of things that I thought people would relate to. I just wanted to subtract the things that maybe people would be distracted by, Just that minimalist thing. It's really hard to do less. But yeah, I kind of wanted to remove a lot of stuff. So one of the things that I was trying to do was write songs really fast and do a lot of them. So I wrote 60 songs for Feeling Strangely Fine, the album that has Closing Time on it. So I was probably halfway through that path of writing 60 songs. I probably had written 30 songs. And the guys, John and Jacob, my bandmates, had been clamoring for a new song to close our sets with, because they were bored with us doing a song called If I Run, which I would usually put at the end of our sets. They were bored with that. So I had this mission from them to write a closer for our shows. And I literally sat down in the living room on the couch with an acoustic guitar, and I was just thinking, okay, what can I write? Closing time. It's it's a song about closing time, because all we did was play bars. We weren't playing arenas. There is no closing time at an arena, but there is where we were. And so I was like, okay, closing time. And I actually was just picturing the 400 bar in Minneapolis and maybe the Uptown, but mostly the 400, and what it was like when they started yelling at you to leave and turning on the lights and rousting the people,
Yeah.
And so open all the doors and let you out into the world. I think that literally was the first thing I thought of for the song, and I just loved it so much. And also it had this quality of rhythmically scanning with the melody. I thought of the melody and the lyrics at the same time. It was almost like the melody had a kind of a sentence structure to it. It was already a sentence, even without any words. And so the words came pretty easy. When I was about halfway through writing it, I realized that it was sort of a funny and weird ass pun about the fact that my wife and I were expecting a baby. Because like all that stuff about like turn all the lights on over every boy and every girl, and even the lines that at that point I started like almost treating it as like a fun pun about bar time meets being born.
Yeah, like one last call for alcohol, finish your whiskey, your beer, like, hey, it's time to grow up and be a dad now.
Well, maybe, although actually for me, that was a joke about getting like the umbilical cord cut, like getting cut off. Because, you know, they would say, you're cut off, man. Like, because I was always in those bars, and there was always someone in the group who was overserved, you know. Even that word is so funny, like overserved. So they're going to have to cut him off because he got overserved, you know. It's such,
I'm in a bar.
It's so forgiving. It's such forgiving language. Oh, we're sorry, sir. You're violent because we overserved you. You know what I mean? It's very like, it's enabling, I guess I'd say. But anyway, so, you know, one last call for alcohol. It's like we're going to kick you out of the womb, and, you know, and you're going to fend for yourself. So I actually, when I finished the song, I was like, I thought it was very clever by the end. I wasn't really done with it until I sent it to my A&R guy, and he made me change one line, but we could talk about that later.
Okay, well, I got to tell you, I love the imagery of the story that you painted here. I love that. I love, you know, the greatest songs to me have the best stories, and I love the setup here, and I love what you just explained. Verse 1 here, it's still just guitar and piano, but there's a shaker. I never knew this until I got in the headphones. Yeah. I never heard that shaker. It's almost inaudible if you aren't listening in headphones, and it almost sounds like there's a warbled, like record scratching sound there with it. Did you have some kind of a chorusy effect or something on that shaker?
I'm not sure if there's a chorusy effect on the shaker or not. I know that one of the things about Feeling Strangely Fine was that our producer on the record, Nick Launay,
which I wanted to talk to about it. Did he mix the record too, or did Bob Clearmountain mix it?
He didn't mix it, but he recorded it, and he had a way of making it. He was very, very intense. He was a very lovely guy. We had a lot of fun, but he was very intense, and we would laugh because he would take a while to get the various sounds. And we'd be playing a flute and a mellotron, you know, just those kind of Stairway to Heaven style flutes, you know. We'd be playing a flute line on a mellotron, and he'd be dicking around with the EQ until he got it to sound kind of strangely like hefty, like heavy, like how you get a flute to sound. We would be marveling, like shit, like Nick, this flute sounds so big, and he would say, yes, everything has to sound intense and big. So with the shaker, it's first of all, it's a handful of really big shakers. It's Jacob with as many shakers as he can hold in one hand. He might have even been playing with two hands. And so a lot of that crackliness might just literally be like the random attack of all the extra shakers that he's holding, you know.
There's lots more with Dan Wilson coming up after a few words from our sponsors.
Looking to elevate your music career? DistroKid is a digital music distribution service that enables musicians to distribute their music to online stores and streaming platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Amazon, Tidal, and many more. DistroKid collects earnings and payments, sending them to you, the artist. With DistroKid, artists unlock a world of possibilities. From easily paying collaborators with splits, to securing your music with DistroLock, DistroKid covers all bases. Plus, you can promote your releases with Hyperfollow and create eye-catching visuals with a Spotify Canvas generator, all for free. But that's not all. Introducing the DistroKid app, now available on iOS and Android. Artists can manage their releases, view streaming stats, and withdraw earnings, all from the palm of their hand. And for those looking to perfect their sound, check out Mixia. With its simple interface and customizable mastering options, artists can make their music sound polished and professional within minutes. And don't forget about Instant Share, DistroKid's newest feature. Share large files securely with collaborators, producers, and more, ensuring your music streams at the highest quality. Ready to take your music to the next level? Download the DistroKid app and explore their suite of tools today. Plus, listeners can enjoy 30% off their first year by visiting distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes. That's distrokid.com/VIP/DeMakes.
Flex your business with an American Express Business Gold Card. You'll earn 4 times membership rewards points on your top 2 eligible spending categories, like transit and electronics, each month, on up to $150K in combined purchases per year. Plus, you can now earn 3 times membership rewards points on flights and prepaid hotels booked on AmexTravel.com. Terms and points cap apply. Learn more at AmericanExpress.com/business-gold. Amex Business Gold, built for business by American Express.
I think you're on mute.
Workday starting to sound the same?
I think you're on mute.
Find something that sounds better for your career on LinkedIn. With LinkedIn Job Collections, you can browse curated collections by relevant industries and benefits, like flex PTO or hybrid workplaces, so you can find the right job for you. Get started at linkedin.com/jobs. Finding where you fit. LinkedIn knows how.
Hello, Tom May here, host of Future Friday. I've spent the last 15 years on the road with my band, The Menzingers, where I've met all kinds of wild and fascinating people. So I started a podcast. On Future Friday, I talk to fellow musicians about the moments that made them, their passions outside of music, and the curiosities that tie us all together. I've also talked to the likes of UFO researchers, magicians, soldiers, and documentary filmmakers, and I'm constantly searching for folks that can shape and change our view of the world. You can check out Future Friday wherever you like.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, what's up? This is Blake Weiland. I'm the host of the Tone Mob Podcast. It's a show where I interview guitar people about guitar stuff. We talk about their pedals, their amps, their accessories, their preferences, all that stuff, as well as a healthy dose of whatever comes up. Topics have ranged from aliens to addiction and anywhere in between. Oh yeah, and pizza. We're definitely going to be talking about pizza. So get the show wherever you're listening to this podcast at. Just search The Tone Mob in your search bar and it will pop right up. Come join us. We're having a lot of fun. Thanks for checking it out.
I can hear you sing it to me in my sleep.
And now, back to the show.
I'm assuming you recorded this probably late 97, early 98. Was this recorded analog?
It was recorded in 97. It was recorded... Yeah, it's 100% analog. In fact,
Okay.
Nick had done a couple of records on Pro Tools already, and all the alternative rock bands that we knew on tour were fully digital on tour, as far as I knew. But Nick was very intense that we stay on tape.
Right on. Well, the other thing here is the strings here, and I don't know if those are synths or those are actual strings, but there's haunting synth part strings that come in panned off left on the second half of this verse, and at the very end on the line, but you can't stay here before you launch into chorus 1. Those strings build up to like a crescendo.
But you can't stay here. I know.
Were those actual strings there?
There's two things going on. The studio was downtown in this kind of like industrial neighborhood of Minneapolis on Washington Avenue, and there was an old bar or speakeasy 2 doors down from the studio that was abandoned. In fact, the bar of this bar was collapsed on the floor of the abandoned space. And the studio owner, John Cooker, arranged with the landlord to cheaply rent that abandoned bar. And we set up a bunch of instruments for like rehearsing ideas, and also we set up a Tascam DA88 tape recorder, digital tape recorder. And so we would mess around with sounds and ideas while Nick was in the other in the big room working on the record itself. And I think John and Jacob cooked up that initial string idea, that violin that kind of like turns into outer space almost. And then we asked Jacob to do string arrangements for a bunch of the songs with real players. And so we got a bunch of people from the Minnesota Orchestra into the big room. And so halfway through closing time, those mellotron strings that kind of seem like they're in outer space, they actually morph into a real I think it's an 8-piece chamber orchestra.
Yeah, no, that part's great. I love it's a minimalist approach here. You just got the guitar and a piano, but those strings come in. It just adds that layer of depth. I love that part.
When we delivered the song, the consensus at the label was there were no singles on the record.
Oh, jeez.
Even though it had Closing Time on it. And it had Secret Smile that became a huge hit in Europe.
Nobody knows it, but you've got a secret smile, and you use it only for me. Nobody knows it, but you've got a
Anyway, it had a lot of stuff that got tons of airplay, but the label deemed it unreleasable because it had no singles. One of the things they offered was if we would put drums throughout Closing Time, maybe, just maybe, it could be released as a single.
What?
So the idea that kind of like electric guitar and voice and piano verse was a source of great pain for MCA because they felt like people would be tuning out, and like not enjoying the song.
That is so crazy when you hear stories like that. I can't tell you how many times I heard that where the label interjects just something that is just completely wrong in this case.
Yeah. Can you do something really cheesy and bad, please?
Yeah. Can you not make this a hit? That's what we're asking for here. Well, chorus 1 comes in at the 58-second mark.
I know who I want to take me home. I know
I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. Again, simplistic. But man, in terms of what's going on here, it's the end of the night. They're calling last call. You got your eyes circling the bar, and who am I going home with? Who can't relate to that lyric?
It's funny though because I think my band was I'm happy about my band. I feel very lucky to have had my guys, and I think we felt alienated or distant from, I guess you'd say, the norm of touring machismo, the kind of toxic masculinity of touring life. And the three of us always felt uncomfortable in settings like that. And so we had our own little bubble of less macho kind of band life. And I think that's what led, me to be able to sing I Know Who I Want to Take Me Home. It's not a very dude-like thing to say because
I didn't think about it that way.
I think you're the one. Take me home, please. It's very yielding and kind of open, and it didn't really match up with the masculinity of the era.
That's so funny you say that because I just took this lyric as anybody's singing this.
Sure,
male,
of course.
female, patrons. It's every. I didn't look at it from the male perspective. That's interesting that you brought that up.
Well, I think at the time though, I think the normal voice. So I'm out on a limb, but if someone said, okay, name all the different kinds of singers in a band, the list would be. This is terrible, but the list would be like, well, there's the R&B guy, and there's the metal guy, and there's the like goth guy, and there's the funk guy, and there's the chick singer.
Uh-huh.
Like the woman gets one slot in the giant rainbow of possibilities. At that time, it was a very male-dominated, music world, and I don't know if everything has changed the way it needs to, but certainly different now than it was then, and I'm glad of it. So I don't know. All I'm saying is like that I Know Who I Want to Take Me Home is very open-ended and very anybody could be singing it, and I think that's a blessing. But I think partly it's a blessing because I was with my guys and we were kind of soft and open and like not really very macho. So
Yeah, well, and I also took the lyric at, because it's you said it. It's so open ended that I know who I want to take me home. I'm with my husband or my wife. I'm with my girlfriend. I'm with somebody that I'm going to go home with them. I already have somebody, so it could be looked at in a lot of different ways. And
yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like
yeah.
that about this.
Yeah,
Again,
yeah.
it's simple, but it could mean so many things. And you brought up some things I hadn't even thought of. The drums and the bass come in on the downbeat here of the chorus. Tambourine also comes in as well. Is this vocal double tracked here? Because
Yeah.
I swear I hear a harmony way tucked back. I know the harmonies come later. Is there a harmony here almost inaudible?
I know who I want to take me home, Closing time.
I think John is singing a harmony in each of the choruses, but in the first one, I think Bob Clearmountain made that harmony really quiet. And yeah, the vocal is double tracked.
Okay, I can hear. And Bob did mix it. Bob Clearmountain mixed this track. Okay.
Well, there's another mix of it. The versions of the album that came out before 2020 had a mix by Jack Joseph Puig on the album, but the single and the version that everyone in the world has heard is Bob's single mix.
Right, and the single mix was 3 minutes and 52 seconds, about 40 seconds shorter. But I went for the album cut here, so we're getting
We're talking about Jack.
whole,
Then we're talking about Jack Joseph Puig.
Yeah, so we're getting the whole thing here, and I love chorus one because you don't get the harmonies you get later as the song builds.
Closing time for you to go out to the places you will be from. Closing time, this room won't be open till your brothers or your sisters come. So gather up your jackets, move it to the exits. I hope you have found a friend. Closing time, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Yeah.
Closing time. Time for you to go out to the places you will be from. Closing time. This room won't be open till your brothers or your sisters come. So gather up your jackets. Move it to the exits. I hope you have found a friend. Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Yeah. And I love this verse. I absolutely love where the song is continuing with the story here. I did listen to the demo of this song. I found the demo on YouTube. And I noticed, so gather up your jackets. You skip the line, move it to the exits. You go straight to, I hope you have found a friend.
Closing time, gather up your jackets. I hope you have found a friend.
Other than that, the only difference really in the demo was the very end. You don't come back to the verse refrain.
Oh, yeah.
But the demo was really interesting. I try to look at those, which I was going to ask you. It doesn't sound like much change from demo form to this besides production elements that Nick introduced, correct?
Yeah, the demo, we were making demos of the songs in John's basement at that time. My brother Matt and John Munson from Semisonic had an apartment, and they were allowed to use the basement for recording. So they had a simple demo rig down there, and I would come over and with 3 or 4 songs, and we'd do very simple demos of the 3 or 4 songs. John and me and Jake just conferring about them, and usually, as I remember it, I would play the guitar one time and sing twice, and then we'd be done with that song. We'd move on to the next song, and that might be that's the demo you heard.
I love it because the idea was the idea from the beginning. It's like the suits at the label couldn't even mess it up wanting to put the drums in. Here's the idea. It really didn't change because it didn't have to.
The only difference, adding the verse at the end, the one line of the verse at the end. But the other difference is that line in the second verse, gather up your jackets, move it to the exits, I hope you've found a friend. Initially, that line was closing. It was like, it was the same as the rest. It was like... Closing time, gather up your jackets. I hope you have found a friend. It's literally, it was like the same structure as all the other lines. Closing time,
yeah.
Every new beginning comes from some. It was changing throughout. And we sent out a batch of 3 or 4 songs. Each time we would do this little batch of songs, we'd send it to the label. And our A&R guy, Hans, I don't think he really was the driving force in this, but he was always like, your songs are too complex, you're too smart. Why are you showing off so much? You don't need to use all these words. People don't understand what you're saying. What's wrong with you? I hate you. And so so he got this batch of songs, which was probably like DND, Closing Time, Singing in My Sleep. It was like 4 songs that all had the same chords and, no changes in the verse, nothing, super, just dead simple. Me on my whole trip that I was on of making things really simple. And he called me up and he said, okay, these songs are amazing. I love these songs. Closing Time is really, really great. Can't there be some variety somewhere in the song? Can't you have one line in one of the verses that's different from the other lines structurally or melodically? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I can do that. I'm not sure if I can do that. So by the time we got to the studio, I had thought about it a bunch. And I realized that if I did that third line of the second verse slightly different with that gather up your jackets, move it to the exits. I hope you have found. Then going back to the melody one last time, the regular melody would be kind of exciting.
Had more impact.
Yeah, so the every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end line. The next line is kind of set up by the chant of gather up your jackets. And that was one of the lines when we'd sing it live. I didn't anticipate this, but when we'd sing the song live, the people really like to go, gather up your jackets, move it to the exit. They like to chant because it sounds like a soccer chant, a hooligan chant in England.
I'll tell you, the best hit singles, if you really analyze them, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I mean, typically in a song, your chorus is the pinnacle. It's maybe considered the most important part of the song, but I could make the argument that the verses are choruses in this song.
Yeah.
The closing time, that whole part. And I always research these episodes. I looked at the live videos, and the audience with this song in particular, they're singing every darn word, like they're hanging on for life, like it's the chorus. That's awesome.
When the song first went to radio, there was already a lot of research that they would do, that the labels would do, and the consultants would do. So when the song went to radio, it got a little burst of like attention and love from radio, and there was some sense that it was a really, really good song. And then they would do. Then the stations or the label, I forget who would do the research, but they would do the research. They would do this thing called call-outs where they would call listeners and say, have you heard this song? And they'd play a 15 seconds of a song. And the listener would say yes or no. They'd do that for a handful of songs, and then they go, thank you very much. You get a free ticket to see Matchbox 20 or whatever. And so when they were first doing research for Closing Time, the station would call up the listener and they'd go, have you ever heard this song? And they'd play the recording and they'd play, I know who I want to take me home. And the listener would be like, no, I haven't heard that song. So it researched really badly. And when our manager, Jim Grant, heard about this, he said, you idiots, tell them to use the verse. And then when they put it back in the research and called up the same, population of listeners, have you heard Closing Time? Everyone would be like, oh yeah, I've heard that song, yeah. And suddenly it researched really well. But that was because Jim said, no, don't use the chorus.
The title is a hook that's in the verses. It's great. I love the harmonies on verse 2. It's on Closing Time in the first half of the verse. On the back half, it's on I hope you have found a friend. Closing time, every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. Yeah, the harmony, the note choices there are awesome. They're haunting. The placement of the bass here in verse 2 is killer.
So gather up your jackets, move it to the exits. I hope you have found your friend.
The shaker's now louder in the mix, panned off left. And that shaker here is really important, I feel, because it keeps the song moving. It's not a super fast song, and it keeps it moving. It's helpful when you have a song with the same riff, that shaker there.
It's that's Jacob, who's drumming but also playing the shaker, and he's funky, so when he plays, even the shaker in the beginning of the song, it feels like a groove, you know. It's not just somebody shaking a shaker back and forth. It's you're actually hearing the groove of the song in the shaker. At the time of recording that song and making that album, my daughter Coco was in the hospital, and she was in the hospital for 11 months. So at that time in the studio, we all had this sort of agreement that I would come in and do a flurry of like either vocals or guitar solos or like listening and making notes to the things that John and Jacob and Nick had done. So, and then I would go back to the hospital for a while. So, you know, some of the days I was there for like half the time that the rest of the guys were there, and even less. And that was a little bit painful for me, but it worked out really well because it gave them all the chance to do a lot of experimentation without me kind of trying to streamline everything right away.
Yeah.
My tendency would be like, no, mute. We don't need that. Mute that. Take that out. But when I remember when I left, we had closing time sounding really amazing, and we cut it live mostly. It was drums, bass, and guitar live. And I had insisted on having no bass in the second verse. That was going to be drums and guitar and piano. And that piano was an idea that John made up during rehearsal. That piano, but he forgot it the day after. He started playing these other parts, and I was so annoyed because the thing, I was like, no, this is what you played, and I played it back. I played it for him. I said, this is what you did. Don't change that. It's really, really good. It's not just anything. It's perfect, you know.
Yeah.
So my thought was like for live, during the second verse, Jacob could play the drums, I would play the guitar, and John would play that piano riff. So there wouldn't be bass. So we weren't gonna. So I was like, don't play the bass during the live take of the song. So in the original tracking of the song, there was no bass in the second verse at all. And then I came in one day after they'd been working all day on stuff, and they played me like several songs that they'd been working on, and one was closing time. And I said, "Hey, what's going on? You put bass in the second verse. Why'd you do that? You know, you can't do." I said, "Don't do that." And they basically sold me on it. They said, "No, it's just a little. You're gonna love it. You're gonna like the way it sounds, and it's not just continuous bass. So John could play those notes and also play the piano. So you can have your way, Dan. But we like the bass."
I got to side with them, Dan, on this one.
Yeah,
I absolutely love it. I love the sparseness of it. It's so great. Chorus 2, same exact lyric as chorus 1, except those harmonies are very prominent now. They're panned off left. I like where they sit in the mix on here. I love those harmonies.
I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home.
And then we get into the bridge. It's a 20-bar bridge build-up. It's just synth and piano for the first 2 bars. This is where we take that departure to B flat major here for a little bit. And this is kind of panned off to the left. And then on the right, at the 3rd bar, a drum loop comes in with a really cool tambourine accent. And then there's this swirling chorusy effect that's moving around. It's like almost like a backwards sound. Is that what you were speaking with earlier with the synths, the strings?
That was one of the effects that John and Jake and Nick put on the Mellotron strings. But then we had a real string section play along with that melody for that section.
After that 20 bar buildup, there's a 16 bars of a kind of an octave guitar solo. It's not like this, crazy rock, super fast, cheesy guitar solo. It's just kind of subtle in there over the same chord arrangements. How did that come about? And did you think of going somewhere even further than the bridge here with that, or was it just kind of the same? Because of course on the demo it was the same.
I can't remember in the demo if it goes back to a chorus after the bridge, but I think the guitar solo section came in rehearsal before the recording sessions. We were working in that speakeasy next door for our rehearsals, and that's the place where John came up. There was an upright piano in there, and that's where John came up with that piano riff on the song. But also, we were trying to figure out the general structure of the songs for live tracking. And I remember when we did the solo, I wanted it to be really melodic. I didn't want it to be... Because I had decided that me kind of skronking around on blues scales was one of the distracting things that people didn't relate to when they heard our songs. And so I was not really that much of a sacrifice for me to not skronk around on blues scales, And so that was one of the things we didn't do that much of on Feeling Strangely Fine. A couple songs like She's Got It All Worked Out. There's a couple.
I mean, the part here, bow now now now, that the guitar's doing, it's so simple, but it's perfect for this part.
It's like, to me, it's a little bit like... It's a little bit like In My Life by the Beatles.
Yeah.
That is a little bit like the solo in Closing Time. I just wanted to keep it really simple, and once we got a fuzz factory from Zvex to get that nasty zipper unzipping sound on the guitar, we didn't need a lot of notes. It sounded so weird and great.
Yeah, no, it's great. And now this next part, is this what we would call verse 3 here, or is this a post-bridge part? This, when it comes back to the Closing Time lyric there, what would you call that?
Closing time for you to go out to the places you will be from.
I'd call it verse 3, and it's just a quarter of the length of all the other verses.
Fair enough. We'll go with that. The lyric is closing time. Time for you to go out to the places you will be from. There's no piano here. The piano's missing from this part. It goes on for 8 bars. Then there's 4 bars after that of just a kind of a synth holdout. It's really suspenseful before we get into chorus 3. And this lyric here, I love that line, to the places you will be from.
Yeah, I like that line too.
Yeah, it kind of gives you something to ponder.
A lot of the comments we got about the song were so funny because a lot of them were like, "What is so melancholy about being in a club at bar time? What's your problem?" But that was to me, that I think that line referred to being born. It's you're going to go out from the womb into the place you will be from. Like before you're born, you're not from anywhere. When you're born, you're from Minneapolis. You're from a place. You've landed on Earth. You're in the place you will be from, and you'll always be from Minneapolis from here on. That's kind of how I heard the line. That whole cool stretch, that whole period after that song. After that line. That sort of stretched out, long, elongated bar of swirling sound was created by the mastering engineer.
No kidding.
It was already mixed. It was in time. It was like, places you will be from, 2, 3, 4. I know who. And she was given the kind of impossible task of stretching that bar into 2 bars.
It's great. I would have never thought that was done post.
Yeah,
what
the
you guys came
creativity
up with.
never stopped. It was because of a friend of ours named Karen Glauber said, "Can she heard of a mix of the song?" And she said, "This is so great, but can you do that thing that Bob Clearmountain does on his songs, like with Simple Minds, where he takes a pause and makes it really long?"
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's kind of out of Bob Clearmountain's hands right now. And Karen said, oh, he must have some way he could make that pause. He does it in a lot of songs. I'm like, I don't think he's the one who makes those pauses long, actually. But
that is awesome.
We had the mastering engineers do it instead.
That's very cool. Well, chorus 3 is only time you get a double chorus in the song.
I know I want to take me home. I know I want to take me home. I know I want to take me home. Take me home. I know I want to take me home. I know I want to take me home. I know I want to take me home. Take me home.
The first, all the lines are exactly the same as the other choruses, but the first half, there's harmonies on every line. I love the second line here. I know who I want to take me home. The lead vocal melody changes there.
Oh, yeah.
I know who I want to take me home. I know who.
You get that same lead vocal melody line on the second half, on the second line as well. Halfway through in this one, the intro piano comes back in. That haunting piano part that we were talking about. It's panned off right. It's not super loud. And at the end of each line on Home, that octave guitar solo hook comes in there at the end. You're getting that again that you had post-bridge there in the solo, which I love. At the very end here, there's a killer bass run that's locked in with the drum fills that happens before we go into.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. It's heavy in an otherwise song that's not, I wouldn't really characterize as heavy. That part's just so locked and so good.
A lot of the song is like John and Jake, the rhythm section, they're kind of power in check. You know, they're like, they have all this kind of power that they can do, but they were just like holding it in check and throwing down the song, right? And at that one moment is like almost like they're kind of pulling back the curtain and showing you the power that they can bring to the party. But you know what I mean? It was like, here's what we could be doing, you know, and then it was over right after that, you know.
No, the part's great. And then right after there's a 12-bar, what I'm calling a musical interlude, where the piano is panned off left and that octave guitar solo is now with the piano. They're both louder in the mix. They're just kind of hammering you there.
Yeah.
And now we get into the outro, which, as I mentioned earlier, Dan, is not on the demo. It's not there. It just ended with "Take Me Home" and
right.
kind of fizzled out.
Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
Closing time. Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end. So we get that lyric again that was in verse 2 at the back half of verse 2.
Right.
It's just you here. There's no harmonies.
Right.
And it's just guitar panned off left and that piano panned off right like the intro. And the song ends on the C chord, which I call that a suspense because it does not resolve to the root G.
I didn't really remember that. I didn't remember. What?
Or am I hearing that wrong?
I don't know. Wow.
Sometimes I tell people something they don't know about their songs. Other times they school me. Which will it be here, Dan?
Geez, I suppose it is kind of a...
Yeah, It leaves you hanging. I call it the cliffhanger, the suspense core. I love that. That's
now
one of my
I really
go-to
like
tricks.
the song. Now finally I really like the song.
Yes!
The last chord is unexpected. That's probably something the label would have wanted us to fix too, you know.
Yeah, it's got to resolve all happy back
Yeah.
on G. You can't let him hanging. Well, I gotta say, but before we break here, again, one of my favorite songs.
Oh.
I love this track, and I was so honored to be able to talk to you about it and break it down. You know, you had written like 60 songs for the record, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And this was just, at some point, another one of the bunch.
Right.
Out of all the songs, when you had the final mix back, you're cruising around in your car, you know, you're getting chatter from the label, the A&R guy has his opinion, and, you know, your wife maybe has her opinion, your friends, whomever. Did Closing Time stick out to you? You're like, there's something here, this is special. Did you know it then?
Well, I didn't know that it would be like a life-changing, you know, or game-changing thing for the band. But I was really looking on the whole record as like, number one, it was a respite from the anxiety and agony of my daughter being in the hospital for that year. So in a way, it wasn't escapism, because I was very, very serious about it, but it was definitely a refuge from that painful phase of our lives. And then secondly, I was thinking of the whole record as like just a crazy art project, because the album before I thought was like a whole bunch of hit singles, and we really like, I don't know, I didn't think, oh, we're going to be stars and we're going to be millionaires. I just literally thought we're going to have, you know, there's going to be hits on this and people are going to really dig the band. And what happened was people dug the band and it went really well on the previous album, but none of the songs were hits. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to go into the next thing with that kind of attitude. Like, I'm not going to be, oh, we're going to be huge now, or we're going to just do it. We're going to write smashes. You know, I literally was thinking, okay, this is going to be just a really artful record. This will be our like Abbey Road with like songs that are, you know, have orchestras in them and constructed in the studio, and like, you know, just allow ourselves the latitude to just be really, really artful. And so I didn't really think it was going to be like a commercial smash at all. When the time came to release a single or choose one, I remember my wife Diane and I had a conversation about it, and we listened to the whole record, and she said, it's time for you to go big. And I was like, okay, but what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. And she goes, well, to her it was obvious. Like, I thought that the single was a song called Never You Mind, which I think could have been like an alternative rock medium hit, I suppose.
I believe you know me well. I react like you're ringing a bell. Are you sorry that you treat me unkind? Never you mind.
But that's the one I thought was the one. And she said, well, it's time for you guys to go big. And I said, well, but I know, but like, what would that entail? Like, tell me more. And she said, well, it's got to be, the single has to be either Secret Smile or Closing Time. And because those are the songs that are going to go big. And so you just go for it. Don't be coy. Don't release a less good song first. Just do one of the best two songs first. And so when I talked to Nick Launay about that, I said, well, Diane and I were talking, and nobody likes to hear, oh, I was discussing this with my wife, and but Nick and I were talking about what would be the single, and he thought Never You Mind was the single too. And I said, well, I was talking to Diane, and she knows more about my music than anybody, and she says it's Closing Time. And Nick said, oh, no. Closing Time is for the punters, he said. And like in England, the punters are the bar-going kind of average people. Just everybody.
Your average fan.
Just the fans, the football fans. Yeah. And when Nick said that, I had almost like a revelation. I was like, yeah, this song is for the punters. That's actually amazing.
He meant it derogatory, but you took that as, no, this could go big.
I think he was like, you guys are too smart for that. You know, all the stuff that Hans, our A&R guy, hated about us were the things that Nick loved about us. And so Nick was like, no, don't do Closing Time, that dumb song. Do something smarter, like Never You Mind. But I never thought that Closing Time was dumb, so I was not really moved by the argument that it it wasn't smart. I actually always thought it was a really smart song.
That's awesome. Well, I absolutely love it. And again, thank you so much for taking the time. And
Yeah.
before we leave, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with? What's going on? I understand you have a new EP coming out called Dancing on the Moon very soon. And
Yes.
anything else you'd like to talk about?
Let's see. I got, the Dancing on the Moon EP comes out shortly, or by this time maybe it's out already. And I don't know, it's one of my favorite recordings I've ever done. And especially the title song, Dancing on the Moon, I think is really, really great.
If it isn't real, why does it feel like we're living it? Dancing on the moon, Venus and Mars for an audience. Now we're on our own, nobody else in the universe. Dancing on the moon, you and me waiting on the world to turn.
And then I'm also working on new songs with Semisonic. We put out an EP in 2020 that went really, really well, and we were so happy about it. But maybe if we put out another batch of music next year, we'll be able to go on tour for that. So yeah, my new Dancing on the Moon EP is exciting for me, and doing music again with the guys has been really fun.
Awesome, man. Well, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Cool, Chris. Yeah, it was nice to talk to you, and I love your chart of the song. That's really great. Also, you mentioned some things about it that I had totally lost track of or forgotten. It's really cool.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, talk to you soon.
You've always known there's someone out there watching as you go. Just a
I hope you all enjoyed that amazing conversation with Dan Wilson, but don't go anywhere. There's lots more Chris DeMakes a Podcast after a few words from our sponsors.
Hey everyone, this is Tuck from Fit for a King, an off-road minivan. Every week I bring you fun interviews alongside your favorite metalcore entertainers with my new podcast, Get Tucked. Join me every Monday with bands like Counterparts, Crystal Lake, like Moths to Flames, and many more. We play unsigned and undiscovered bands, deep dive into each artist's history, and of course provide the greatest breakdowns in current metalcore. Tune in to Get Tucked every Monday, out now through Sound Talent Media.
Hey, this is Steve Choi, host of the Musicians Guild podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media podcast network. Within the four walls of the Musicians Guild, we'll be discussing the habits, idiosyncrasies, experiences, and general psychology of my friends and peers, all involved with music in various capacities. Listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com.
Hello out there.
Hi, I'm Hal Schwartz.
And I'm Flynn McLean. We want to tell you about our podcast, None But the Brave, which is dedicated to taking a deep dive into the work of Bruce Springsteen.
We're currently in our 5th season. Our latest episodes focus heavily on Bruce's 2024 tour and have featured such guests as Anthony Castrovince from MLB Network and Barstool's Kirk Minahan.
We're also covering the 40th anniversary of Bruce's biggest record, Born in the USA. And as part of that, coming up this week, Uprock's cultural critic Stephen Hyden returns to the show for a fascinating hour-long conversation about his new book, There Was Nothing You Could Do, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA and the End of the Heartland.
To listen, you can go to our website, mbtbpodcast.com, or subscribe on your preferred podcasting platform.
We hope to see you further on up the road.
Thank you so much. We'll be seeing you.
The Helping Friendly podcast explores the music and fan experience of Phish through interviews and deep dives on shows and tours. For more than 10 years, we've created insightful and fun discussions about our favorite band, and with the help of our guests and thematic series, we're still discovering new angles of appreciation for Phish. And when the band is on tour, we provide a review of every show the following day. As one of our listeners said, any Phish fans that enjoy meandering conversations and incredible insight on new and old Phish shows, this is for you. Highly recommend. It's not just about the band and the shows, it's about the journey getting there. Throughout 2024, we're going to be running down the top 25 Phish tours of all time, and that'll be interspersed with show reviews and regular episodes. Join us and check out the Helping Friendly podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, this is Dewey Halpus, host of Peer Pleasure on the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. Join me each week as I explore another long-form conversation with one of your favorite musicians, actors, comedians, or creatives. From Chino Moreno of the Deftones, John Gorley of Portugal the Man, to Fat Mike from NoFX and Ian Mackay from Fugazi and Minor Threat, we go all over the map. From Fall Out Boy to Slayer, Peer Pleasure has it all. Check us out now on Sound Talent Media.
Bowie, Dylan, Marley. You've heard the names and maybe you've heard their songs, but what about the stories behind the records that made titans of music like these so universally loved and important? Join me, Josh Adam Myers, host of The 500, as each week I go through a different album from Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums list from 2012 with an incredible lineup of comedians, actors, and musicians talking about how the music has impacted their lives. New episodes of The 500 come out every Wednesday. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Find Yourself, the new single from Punchline, is out now.
I'll lead or I'll follow, I just want to get there. If anyone knows better, then please show us out of here. I'm not saying I know, but I see the next step. If that's all we can get, then it's better than zip. This is not joke, man, this is a fight. Trying to find yourself in the right place, the right time.
Listen to Punchline's Find Yourself on Apple Music, Spotify, and everywhere you stream music.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a Podcast, all you have to do is email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumighttnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Among Legends from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, featuring Sarah on the drums, Cameron and Tyler on guitars, Anthony on bass, and Mitchell on vocals. You can find their music on all the streaming platforms. Here's a snippet of their song, Come Up Swinging.
I'll never back down, I'm battered and I'm bruised tonight. But when they closing in, you steal my mind up on my back against the wall and fight. I think I'm gonna make it. Yeah, I'm battered and I'm bruised tonight. But when they closing in, you steal my mind up on my back against the wall and fight. I think I'm gonna make it.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
Chris, I think that was one of my favorite episodes.
Man, it's up there for me. What an honor to talk to Dan. Like I said, I was kind of starstruck today a little bit when he came on because I've been researching him. I had no idea what he did outside of Semisonic. How would you know? He's a behind the scenes songwriter and color me beyond impressed.
I mean, beyond Closing Time being a giant hit, and Semisonic had some other hits too, but he has also won a Song of the Year Grammy and an Album of the Year Grammy with completely different artists, like in the past decade. You could not ask for a better person to come on a songwriting podcast than Dan Wilson. I thought that was so cool.
No, he's a song doctor. He's a guy in a band. He's a songwriter in a band. He's a little bit of everything that we've had on this show. You know, Someone Like You, the song he co-wrote with Adele, it's the most downloaded single of all time in the UK. Think about that. The Beatles are from the UK. Like, think about that.
Yeah, Elton John, the Beatles, Oasis, Radiohead,
Queen, Led Zeppelin.
Queen. And the guy that was just on the podcast, he has the most downloaded song of all time in the UK. That is pretty amazing. There's so many things he talked about in this episode on a smaller scale that I thought were so cool. One of the things that he said early in the episode that I related to a lot, he was like, yeah, my parents had 10 albums. I feel like that's how my parents were. They didn't have like a lot of albums. They had like, you know, a John Lennon album, an Anne Murray album, he brought up Tapestry. That was one of the albums that my parents had. And as soon as he brought up Carole King, I'm like, yeah, of course you would be influenced by Carole King. You're a person that writes songs with other people, and that's what she was.
Yeah, and you want to talk about relating to him on a lot of levels, but one of the early things he said in the episode was how he would just study the liner notes. How many times have I talked about that? I mean, my useless knowledge that I call it, and you don't realize, though, he didn't realize then how that would benefit him later, much like it benefited me. It was, on the surface, useless knowledge, but it wasn't. He he was learning.
I was waiting for you to say, hey man, me too. We're the two people ever that did that as kids. but you showed some restraint, and I respect that, Chris. But I think you two are the only two that studied the liner notes. I don't know. Anyway, the other thing he said, dealing with like being a kid and getting into music that I related to, is he said he would check out records at the library. Did you ever check out records at the library as a kid, Chris?
I did, and I never gave him back, which my mother ended up wanting to kill me later on. But yeah, I would check out records. I would also listen to them there. I did a couple of times. That was before I had lawnmower money that I could go spend on cassettes or whatever, for mowing lawns. But yeah, I did a couple times.
Right. I remember checking out Weird Al albums at the Monessen Library. I still remember that. I remember that's where the first place I ever heard the Yoda song, the Weird Al Yoda.
He said, Luke, stay away from the darker side, and if you start to go astray, let the Force be your guide. Oh, my Yoda, Yoda.
I thought it was cool that he got into it, and Chris, this has happened in the past month. When you're at the bar and they turn on the lights and they're like ready for, all right, you got to go. That's the worst.
Yeah.
That is the worst. And to write a song, now he had a sort of double, maybe even a triple meaning in this particular song, but to capture that feeling of like, oh God, I gotta go out into the world now in song. I mean, this is the one song that I think captures that.
Yeah, and he was talking about the chorus, the lyric, I know who I want to take me home. And he had brought up some things that I never thought about it, the meaning behind it. And I gave him some things that he never thought. And the lyric is so, again, not in a bad way. This isn't a 4-letter word, but the simplicity here, and not only that lyric, but the chord arrangement is what to me makes this song special. Those lyrics alone, how simple they are, they could mean so much to so many people.
You've heard that line 1,000 times that you've heard this song. So your takeaway of that is you're looking around the bar and you see that person or whatever, you want them to take you home. That's what you took away from that line, right?
It's one of the things I took away, but it wasn't just me. It was all the people in that bar or that sporting event or whatever was ushering you out. The cattle call at midnight, whatever that was. It could be anybody saying that lyric.
That's what I meant. That's what I thought. Every time I ever heard this song, when it got to that line, what I took away from it was, regardless of where you were, that one person that you love or whatever, you want them to take you home, even if they're not in that bar. Like, there's all these people in this bar, but I know who I want to take me home. That's what that line always meant to me, or what I interpreted it as. But that's what's genius about a great song like this, man. So many different meanings you could take away from it.
Yeah, and I had told Dan, how many times I heard this song, hundreds upon hundreds of times, just heard it as most recently in the grocery store a couple days ago. And this song, I never realized that the chords didn't change except for that small part in the bridge because of the way the instrumentation is here. The little nuances, that piano part, that hook that happens, the way the guitars are played and offset, and just, where the bass is sporadic in the verses, those things make you forget it, that you're hearing the same root notes over and over again. Those little pieces that come in and out. I had no idea till I sat down with my guitar and went, dang, this thing's just the same 4 chords. It's genius.
And yes, listeners, I did ask Dan off mic after they were done with their conversation about the song if he had seen the Office episode where they sing closing time.
Hey, everybody, it's closing time. You don't gotta go home, but you can't stay here. Closing time.
Every office needs an end-of-the-day tradition. Something to tell you the day's over. Otherwise, you go home and the night just feels like more day. It's weird.
Closing time.
WRK.
One last call for alcohol.
No, it's WRK is in
show whiskey and beer.
Oh, my boss is singing closing time. Maybe that's what you're hearing.
Come on, Pam. Closing time. Time for you to go home to the places you will be from.
Let's see, Andy has been manager for 105 days, which means I've heard closing time 105 times. Still don't know the words. And when I was home and home and home.
I know who I want to take me home. want to take me home. I know who I want to take me home. Take me home. Oh.
You know what? Fine. I try to start fun traditions for you guys, but if you don't want to sing, no traditions.
Closing time. Every new beginning.
I never heard that song before, and once I heard it, I did not care for it. But that song means it's time to go home. Now, it's my favorite song.
Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end.
Good night.
He had a funny story about that and how he had met Ed, the actor who plays Andy Bernard in real life, and that was really cool. Dude, overall, amazing episode. As always, but I thought this one was a little extra special.
Absolutely. And I didn't even get into this because, gosh, we talked for so long and it was such a great conversation. But he's written with some Chris DeMakes a Podcast alumni, Kay Flay and Brian Fallon. I did not know that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez, man. Full circle over here on Chris DeMakes a Podcast. Full circle.
Absolutely. And before we have a little closing time here, Chris, we got a few other things we'd like to talk about.
Oh, that's right. We got to tell everybody about the Chris DeMakes a Podcast supporting cast. Yes, if you enjoy this show and you want more amazing episodes like this, if you want to see it continue to go on in perpetuity forever for all the rest of time, head to chrisdemakes.com. For the cost of a cup of coffee per month, you can get bonus episodes of The After Party, a whole back catalog of those episodes, and most importantly, you can support the podcast that you love.
Absolutely. We appreciate your support. Again, that's chrisdemakes.com. Head over there to sign up if you haven't already. We really appreciate it. And give me a follow on Instagram at LessThanChrisD. Want to thank this week's guest, Dan Wilson, for sitting in with us, and we'll see you next week.
Hey, everybody. If you like Chris DeMakes a Podcast, I'm going to assume that you like music podcasts. And if you like music podcasts, check out One Hit Thunder. Each week, we dive into a one-hit wonder, and along the way, we gain some knowledge and have some laughs. Lou Bega, Crazy Town, Harvey Danger, The New Radicals, Aha. We're over 100 episodes in now, and to paraphrase the great Matthew Wilder, nothing's going to break our stride. Subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods.
The number you have reached is 100.7 WMMS.
It wasn't just a radio station, it was a lifestyle.
Cleveland is a rock and roll city for sure.
Yeah! Down! The Wrath of the Buzzard. WMMS. Cleveland.
The rise and fall of one of the most iconic radio stations in America. Profiles. The Wrath of the Buzzard. PROH Files. Subscribe now wherever you get podcasts.
Every listener to Too Much Effing Perspective knows that my co-host Alan Keller is a music nerd. And right up there in his pantheon with the Beatles and Elvis Costello is The Clash. So Alan, it's one thing for you to be a nerd, but how did you rope in a cool guy, 311's Nick Hexum, into a full-on Clash geek fest on our show?
Well, first of all, Alex, it was your idea.
Oh, right.
Second, Nick actually jammed with The Clash's Joe Strummer in a supergroup that included Flea and Tom Morello.
Okay, well, there is that.
And finally, one member of The Clash cited This Is Spinal Tap, the reason our show even exists, as his favorite movie.
Which one?
Hey, if you want to find out, you got to listen to Too Much Effing Perspective. That's Too Much EFFING Perspective. The only podcast you crank up to 11.